there's a war in Ukraine now. It's been going on over a year. It's for me personally, given my life story is a deeply personal one, and I'm returning back to that area of the world. I was there. Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he doesn't want to talk to Vladimir Putin. Do you think they could get in a room together and say you were there in a room with Putin and Zelenskyy, and Biden is sitting in the back drinking a cocktail, or maybe he is at the table participating? How is it possible through negotiation, through the art of conversation, to find peace in this very tense geopolitical conflict?
I think it's eminently possible. I think getting people together in person has always been a good idea. Now, how many times, who's getting them together, under what circumstances, and how many times you're getting them together? The documentary, The Human Factor, about the Mideast peace negotiations, mostly through the 90s, mostly into the Clinton administration, got kicked off under Bush 41. And then the documentary continues through Trump, but just touching basically on it. But they're getting Arafat and the different Israeli prime ministers together in person. And these guys do not want to talk to each other. And depending upon the prime minister, the mere thought of being on the same planet with Arafat was offensive. And they started getting these guys together in person regularly, and they started seeing each other as human beings.
Yeah.
And they started realizing that there was enough room on the planet for them, and that people dying was stupid. And they would slowly work things out by getting these guys together in person. So how long does it take? Who's hosting it? But it's a good idea.
But the skill of achieving that thing that you talk about a lot, which is empathy, and I would say in that case, not just empathy, but empathy plus a bit. You might disagree with this, but a drop of compassion in there.
I think compassion is helpful, but it's not essential. Like if you just know where I'm coming from, like the feeling of being understood.
Yeah, heard and understood. That's powerful.
And again, I know I picked the vast majority of this up on Andrew's podcast, but I picked it up in other places because early on, when we were putting a book together with Tal Raz, the writer, my son, uncredited co-author. So the book's really a collaboration between me, my son Brandon, and Tal Raz. And we're driving for that's right. When somebody feels like what you've said is completely their position, they say that's right. Not you're right, but that's right. So Tal says, I think what's happening here is you're triggering a subtle epiphany in somebody. So I'm like, all right, I'll buy that. So I start looking up the neuroscience of the feeling of epiphany, getting a hit of oxytocin and serotonin. Oxytocin is a bonding drug. You bond to me. I don't bond to you. When you feel completely understood by me, you bond to me. Then in one of the relationship podcasts that I'm listening to on Andrew, it says oxytocin inclines people to tell the truth. You're more honest. All right, so you feel deeply understood by me, you bond to me, and you start getting more honest with me. Serotonin, the neurochemical of satisfaction. Epiphany, you feel oxytocin and serotonin. Being understood. All right, I got you bonding to me, I got you being more honest with me, and I got you feeling more satisfied, so you want less. What more do you want out of a negotiation?
Of course, there's already, with leaders and great negotiators, there's walls built up, defense mechanisms against that, right? You're resisting this basic chemistry, but yes, you should have that. You should work towards that kind of empathy. And I personally believe, I don't actually understand why, but I've observed it time and time again, but getting in a room together and really talking, whether privately or publicly, but really talking. And like this, so I'll comment on this so right now this is being recorded, and a few folks will hear this. But when you really do a good job of this kind of conversation, you forget there's cameras.
Right.
And that's much better than there being even a third person in the room. But often when world leaders meet, there's like press or there's others in the room.
Right.
Like, as you know, man to man or man to woman, you have to like meet like in a saloon, just the two of you, and talk. There's some intimacy and power to that to achieve the if you're also willing to couple that with empathy, to really hear the other person.
Yep.
I don't know what that is. That's like a deep, deep intimacy that happens.
And I think there's actually, because we get asked this in the Black Swan group all the time, like, how do you, Zoom, that's bad, because you don't have the same visual feedback on Zoom.
Yeah.
And that's not true. Like you and I see you from the waist up right now. If we were on Zoom, I'd be looking at you from the waist up.
I'm not wearing pants, yeah. For the internet. I apologize for that. Sorry. Yeah. You only see a small portion.
That's usually where I go. But anyway.
I'm glad we both have ridiculous sense of humor. I appreciate it.
But what makes us different in person? I actually think, I think there's energy that we're unable, we don't have the instrumentation to define yet. And I think that there's a feel. I think there's an actual energetic feel that changes. And just because just because we can't measure it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. I would love to figure out what that is. Folks that are working on virtual reality are trying to figure out what that is. During the pandemic, everybody was on Zoom and Microsoft. Everybody was trying to figure out, how do we replicate that? I'm trying to understand how to replicate that, because it sure is not fun to travel across the world just to talk to Snowden or Putin or Zelensky. I'd love to do it over Zoom, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
No, it's not the same.